You know, when you see like a fully restored classic car, like let's say a vintage Mustang.
Oh, yeah, beautiful cars.
Right.
Oh,
With this just gleaming, flawless paint job, there is this immediate expectation of authenticity. You just assume that underneath that hood, the engine purrs, the transmission is solid,
mm,
and the mechanics basically match the aesthetic perfectly. But imagine you buy this beautiful car, you turn the key, and you realize, it's a golf cart engine in there.
oh, man.
Yeah, it's all show, absolutely no substance, just a shiny shell hiding a completely broken system.
Yeah. I mean, we are naturally drawn to a shiny surface, because it's comforting.
Yeah.
It requires way less cognitive load to look at a nice paint job than to get under the car, take the engine apart, and figure out why it's leaking oil. The facade kind of hides the complicated, messy reality underneath.
Exactly. But in the world of ocean conservation and coastal development, that shiny blue paint job is often hiding a broken engine. And what we are going to look at today is how sometimes the very institutions we trust, like governments, corporations, and even universities,
Right.
are the ones holding the spray can. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are cracking open a really comprehensive multi-language book published in 2026 by National Taiwan Ocean University.
Yeah.
It's titled Pathways to Blue Economy Practice. And our mission today is to unpack the true meaning of the blue economy and place-based revitalization. Okay, let's unpack this because the term blue economy is everywhere right now, but it might not actually mean what you think it means.
It really is a vital piece of research because it brings together specialists across law, management, social sciences, and systems analysis to really interrogate what we're actually doing to our oceans and, the communities that depend on them. The term blue economy has just completely saturated corporate reports and government policies over the last decade. But the underlying argument of this text is that the term has been heavily, heavily distorted.
Like hijacked almost.
Basically, yeah. It is frequently used as a trendy new synonym for just extracting more resources from the ocean, just with better PR.
Right. So if a massive corporation increases its industrial fishing output, but, destroys a local habitat in the process, they might package that in their annual report as blue growth.
Yes.
But before we can spot how the blue economy is being manipulated, we really need to establish what a genuine version of it looks like. And the authors argue that real place-based revitalization goes far, far beyond just bumping up tourist numbers or, selling more local snacks.
Yeah, and they introduce an incredibly useful framework to visualize this in Chapter 1, actually, by Shumei Wang. It's called The Three Fisheries. To understand a coastal community, you have to break it down into three interconnected pillars. First, there are the fisheries themselves. So the actual marine resources, the production methods, the tech used to catch the fish, the markets where they are sold.
So the physical resources and tools.
Exactly. Second, you have the fishing villages. This is the spatial dimension.
Right.
The physical layout of the town, the infrastructure, the local culture, and the public life of the area. And third, you have the fishers, the human element. This encompasses the labor, the family dynamics, and the deep occupational identity of the people actually doing the work.
So looking at those three pillars, it becomes pretty clear that you can't tweak one without impacting the others.
No, you really can't.
Like, if youth employment drops because the young people move to the city, which is the fisher's pillar, right?
Yep, exactly.
Then the physical infrastructure of the village begins to decay, and the traditional ecological knowledge of how to manage the local fisheries is lost. The whole system just weakens.
It operates as a mutually shaping feedback loop. And when a well-meaning development project comes in, they often just ignore that loop entirely. Let's consider a scenario, right, where an external team decides to help a village by pushing them to rebrand their local seafood.
Oh, I've seen this.
Yeah, the proposal usually includes fancy vacuum-sealed packaging, a slick new logo, and a push for direct-to-consumer online sales to create, value-added products.
Which, on the surface sounds like standard business optimization. You improve the product presentation to command a higher market premium.
That is the theory. What's fascinating here is that when you apply that to the reality of the three fisheries, the mechanics totally break down.
How so?
Well, the external team hasn't considered the entire value chain. That fancy new packaging suddenly increases upfront material costs for the fishers. The direct-to-consumer model adds a massive amount of physical labor, like processing, packing, shipping.
Oh, wow.
And that's all on top of their actual job of fishing.
Right, and if the cold chain logistics in that specific village aren't reliable, or if market prices for that fish just suddenly fluctuate, the producer's net income doesn't increase at all.
Exactly. The fishers end up working twice as hard to maintain a brand identity that looks fantastic on the development team's final project report, but does absolutely nothing to improve the community's economic resilience.
Wow.
They're essentially subsidizing the perceived success of the project with their own unpaid labor.
So going back to the car analogy, it's the equivalent of painting a failing car instead of fixing the transmission. You might get a lot of visitors to look at the shiny exterior, but the vehicle still isn't going to get you anywhere.
That's spot on.
Okay, so if genuine revitalization requires navigating this delicate, complex balance between the resources, the space, and the people, we have to look at what happens when the term blue economy is used just as a marketing label. The book in Chapter 2 by Ming-Hao Yang breaks this down into 3 distinct categories of blue washing, starting with informational blue washing.
Yeah, informational blue washing is fundamentally about selective disclosure. It is the act of cropping the photograph to only show the clean, positive outcomes while actively hiding the environmental degradation occurring just outside the frame.
Like cropping out the trash pile next to the beach.
Pretty much. The classic example provided in the text revolves around offshore wind farms. Globally, these are championed as a cornerstone of the blue economy, mostly because the electricity they generate is zero carbon.
But the zero carbon label only applies to the operational phase, right? It completely ignores the manufacturing and life cycle of the infrastructure itself.
Yes, the carbon footprint of manufacturing giant steel turbines, the heavy marine transport required to actually install them in the middle of the ocean, and the actual decommissioning process, it's massive.
Right.
The text highlights a very specific structural problem, which is the disposal of turbine blades. These blades are made of complex, highly durable composite materials like fiberglass and specialized resins.
Oh, because they have to withstand like ocean storms.
Yeah, they are engineered to withstand hurricane-force winds, which means they're incredibly difficult to break down and recycle. Consequently, many of them just end up sitting in specialized landfills.
So a company can produce a glowing sustainability report highlighting the gigawatts of clean energy provided, while totally burying the data on the thousands of tons of unrecyclable composite materials sitting in the ground.
Exactly. And the book also mentions aquaculture in this context, specifically how fish farming data is manipulated.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
So large-scale fish farming frequently claims to relieve the pressure on wild fish stocks. The narrative is that, well, if we farm the fish, we don't have to pull them out of the ocean.
Makes intuitive sense.
Right. But many high-value farm species, like salmon or shrimp, they are carnivorous. They require massive amounts of wild-caught fish, which is processed into fish meal just to survive. The feed conversion ratios can be quite high.
Meaning the industry still has to aggressively fish the oceans to feed the farms? So how do the corporations obscure that reality in their reporting?
The mathematical trick is blending the statistics. Corporations will aggregate the data of their carnivorous fish operations with their filter feeder operations.
Like oysters and mussels.
Yes, which require absolutely zero external feed. By averaging the numbers together, the overall corporate profile looks highly sustainable, completely masking their heavy, ongoing extraction of wild marine resources.
Okay, so informational blue washing relies on hiding the negative data. The second category the book outlines is symbolic blue washing, which operates a bit differently. This is about executing superficial, highly visible actions that do nothing to solve structural problems.
It is action designed for optical value rather than ecological value. A prominent example is tiny, localized coral restoration projects. A major corporation might sponsor a small coral nursery, send executives down for a photo op of planting coral fragments.
In their branded wetsuits, I'm sure.
Oh, definitely. And they receive excellent press for rebuilding the reef. But if that same corporation's core business model is a major contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions, driving the global boiling of the oceans and massive coral bleaching events, the localized restoration is a total distraction.
Yeah, it shows the equivalent of planting a single tree in the middle of an active industrial logging camp. It looks nice for the camera, but it completely ignores the chainsaw.
Exactly. Another example the book provides for symbolic blue washing is the mass release of fish fry. So dumping thousands of baby fish into the ocean to show you are replenishing the local stocks.
Right.
The ecological danger there is profound. If an organization has not rigorously assessed the genetics of the fish they are releasing, they can cause massive genetic pollution.
Genetic pollution.
Yeah, wild fish populations have highly specific localized evolutionary adaptations that allow them to survive in their exact environment. Introducing thousands of generic hatchery-raised fish can dilute those adaptations, ultimately weakening the entire local population's ability to survive. It is well-intentioned action, completely devoid of ecological understanding.
The text also applies this critique to beach cleanups. And initially, that sounds really counterintuitive. Wait, even beach cleanups, how can picking up trash be bad? That sounds totally counterintuitive to anyone trying to help.
Yeah, I know. But the critique isn't about removing plastic bottles. It's about the methodology of the cleaning. Often the goal of a beach cleanup is to achieve that pristine white sand aesthetic desired by tourists. To get that look, groups or municipal tractors will indiscriminately rake the beach, clearing away all the naturally accumulated sea wrack.
The washed up seaweed, driftwood, and organic matter.
Exactly. To a tourist, sea wrack looks like debris. But ecologically, it is the foundational food chain for the coastal ecosystem.
Oh,
Yeah, as that organic matter breaks down, it feeds a massive population of invertebrates like sand fleas, crabs, insects, which in turn are the primary food source for shorebirds and nearshore fish.
so when you rake a beach completely clean of its organic matter to make it look like a postcard, you are effectively starving the local food web.
Yep. We prioritize a sterile aesthetic over a functioning ecology.
Man. So we have actors hiding bad data, and we have them executing superficial PR stunts. But neither of those actually changes who has legal access to the water. Do these entities ever go a step further and rewrite the rules of the ocean?
Oh, absolutely. That leads directly to the third and most severe category, structural blue washing, which is often referred to in the text as ocean grabbing. This is where legal, institutional, and zoning frameworks are weaponized to dispossess local people.
So literally using the law to transfer control from small communities to large capital interests.
Precisely. A government or a corporate coalition will advocate for the establishment of a blue economy zone or a marine protected area. They wave the banner of conservation and sustainable development. But when you look at how the zoning rules are actually written, they formally legalize the exclusion of traditional small-scale fishers from their ancestral waters.
Oh, I see. So a local fisher who has been selectively, sustainably harvesting a reef for generations suddenly finds their boat locked out because the area has been rezoned for conservation.
Yes.
But simultaneously, the state might permit massive, well-capitalized ecotourism operations to drop anchor in that exact same spot.
Exactly. The legal structure is manipulated to criminalize the low-impact local actor while rolling out the red carpet for the high-impact commercial actor. The paperwork is stamped, the process is technically legal, but the outcome is a structural transfer of wealth and access.
We expect corporations to spin their PR, and we know governments are heavily influenced by large economic interests. But the authors of this book reveal a surprising participant in this structural blue washing, and it's one that hits very close to home for them: universities. Specifically, academic institutions operating under the banner of University Social Responsibility, or USR.
Yeah. The authors, being academics themselves, turn a highly critical eye on their own industry. They ask how institutions dedicated to the advancement of knowledge and social good end up perpetuating these harms. And the root of the problem often lies in the structural mechanics of university funding cycles.
The grant cycles, which typically run on strict 2 to 3 year timelines.
Exactly. Because a university research team has to prove their success within that narrow window to secure the next round of funding, they are structurally forced to prioritize short-term, highly visible events.
The fireworks.
Right. They organize a weekend farmers market, they paint a seawall, they generate media buzz, but building genuine local autonomy, shifting local governance, or repairing systemic ecological damage, that takes decades. It is slow, invisible work that does not fit neatly onto a quarterly grant performance report.
And the book details a phenomenon called knowledge grabbing, or biopiracy, which illustrates this perfectly. An academic team enters a fishing village and extracts highly specific traditional ecological knowledge. This could be a multi-generational understanding of hyperlocal tidal patterns, or the historical behavioral changes of a specific fish species.
Yeah, and the university researchers then take that extracted knowledge, translate it into scientific data, and use it to publish academic papers, advance their own careers, or even secure patents for new marine technologies.
Wow.
And they frequently do this without obtaining free, prior, and informed consent from the local community.
FPIC.
Right, and with zero mechanisms for benefit sharing. The village is treated purely as an extraction site for raw data.
So are these academic teams acting maliciously, or is this a structural flaw? Like, are they suffering from a savior complex?
The authors frame this not necessarily as malicious intent by individual researchers, but as a systemic issue they term epistemological violence. The university enters the village operating on a subconscious hierarchy. Modern academic science is viewed as the advanced solution, while the traditional fishing community is viewed as a backward problem that needs to be solved.
They completely fail to recognize that traditional small-scale fisheries are often highly sophisticated, low-carbon systems that have successfully adapted to local conditions over centuries.
Yes, the universities become trapped by their own performance metrics, measuring success by the volume of published papers or the number of community events hosted, rather than evaluating whether the village actually gained political power or economic resilience.
Okay, so if the system is rigged towards short-term metrics and these various forms of blue washing, the obvious question is how the scholars in this book propose we actually fix it. What does a toolkit for genuine co-creation actually look like?
The text provides a rigorous methodological pathway. The core argument is that we have to move beyond simple qualitative research, like taking surveys or conducting interviews, and we have to integrate complex systems analysis. If you want to fix the engine, going back to your car analogy, you need a schematic of how all the parts interact.
They introduce some serious analytical tools here, specifically DEMATEL and fuzzy cognitive maps. Let's break down how a community actually utilizes these mathematically dense concepts. So DEMATEL, which stands for Decision-Making Trial and Evaluation Laboratory, sounds pretty intimidating.
It does, yeah. But its function is actually highly practical. When a coastal community is facing a crisis, say a mix of declining fish stocks, rising poverty, and coastal erosion, they are dealing with a chaotic web of causes and effects. DEMATEL is a mathematical matrix used to untangle that chaos. It takes all the variables the community is facing and maps their causal relationships to separate the root causes from the symptoms.
So if locals input their data, the math tells them which issues are driving the system and which issues are just reacting to it. It tells them exactly where an intervention will have the maximum structural impact, rather than just treating a symptom.
Precisely. The book references models used in places like the Lake Chad Basin to illustrate this. Once you identify the root causes with DEMATEL, you pair it with a fuzzy cognitive map, or FCM. An FCM is a visual mathematical model that maps out nonlinear feedback loops and, crucially, time delays.
Time delays.
Yeah, it isn't black and white. It calculates degrees of influence over time.
Let's look at a practical application of an FCM. So suppose a university team proposes boosting ecotourism as a way to inject cash into a struggling fishing village.
Okay, so the short-term feedback on that map is positive. In year 1, tourist foot traffic increases and local income goes up. But the FCM models the delayed nonlinear effects. It might show that by year 3, the success of that tourism increases local property values and commercial rents.
Oh, I see where this is going.
This gentrification prices the original fishers out of their own homes and pushes them away from the docks, which ultimately destroys the authentic cultural fabric that the tourists originally came to experience in the first place.
Wow, so by forcing the development team to model these unintended side effects mathematically before they ever take action, the FCM prevents them from being blinded by their own good intentions.
Exactly.
The book also introduces the concept of a shadow EIA, a shadow environmental impact assessment.
This is a powerful mechanism for institutional responsibility. The authors argue that universities should not simply accept the official environmental assessments provided by the government or the corporate developers, which, are often heavily biased.
Right.
Academic institutions should use their resources and independence to conduct rigorous shadow assessments before stepping into a community. The primary function of a shadow EIA is to explicitly ensure that the intervention will protect local rights and not inadvertently contribute to structural ocean grabbing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the ultimate goal here isn't just to make academic research more accurate. The authors point out that these tools, the complex systems mapping, the shadow assessments, they aren't just for researchers. They are tools for governance. True knowledge co-creation means the university doesn't hoard the data matrices. They transfer that data and legal literacy directly into the hands of the coastal community.
Yes, you arm the village with the empirical models they need to defend themselves against bad actors, whether that is a corporate developer trying to rezone their waters or even a different short-sighted university team. The text highlights the GL Locale talent concept from the Taiwan-Japan University Alliance as a blueprint for training people to do this kind of work.
GL Locale, so blending global awareness with local application.
It is an educational paradigm designed to cultivate practitioners who understand massive, overarching global forces like climate change or international supply chain shifts, but who know how to navigate them entirely within specific local contexts. The book details their cross-regional field observations, such as the Kyoto studies.
What are they actually doing on the ground in those Kyoto studies?
Well, they take students out of the sterile classroom environment and place them directly into complex field environments across Taiwan and Japan. The students learn that a local community isn't a static museum exhibit waiting to be observed.
Right.
It is a highly active, constantly negotiated space built on layers of history, politics, and memory. They are explicitly trained to identify local power dynamics and approach community knowledge with respect, rather than arriving with, a savior complex.
They learn to diagnose the actual engine of the community, not just stare at the paint job.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, pulling from pathways to blue economy practice. We've examined how genuine revitalization demands a delicate balance between the resources, the physical space, and the people. We've seen how easily the blue economy can be manipulated through hidden data, superficial PR stunts, and structural rezoning that locks out traditional fishers.
And we explored how the solution requires a fundamental shift in how institutions operate. It requires moving away from two-year grant cycles and short-term metrics, and toward the use of complex systems analysis to transfer real data and legal power back to the communities themselves.
It really redefines what it actually means to offer help. Which leads to a final thought for us to consider, building directly on the author's critique of university social responsibility performance metrics. If the true goal of university social responsibility, or any external intervention really, is to build long-term autonomous local capacity, then shouldn't the ultimate performance metric for a university be how quickly it makes itself entirely obsolete to that community?
That is the ultimate test of structural change.
Yeah, if a project collapses the moment the university funding dries up and the researchers go home, it wasn't a local revitalization. It was just an academic residency. It makes you evaluate how that price applies to any system we build or manage in our own professional lives. Are we building resilient engines that can run independently without us, or are we just standing in the driveway, applying another coat of shiny blue paint, ensuring that everyone still needs us to make it look good? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Catch you next time.